If your aspirations are ACC championship and college football playoff berth, Saturday against Louisville really is a must win for the Miami Hurricanes.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. We made it. I'm Alex Dono, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and writer for Canes County at Rivals. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So I was reading this morning, I would say a compelling is the word that I would use, piece by Matt Showdown at Cane Sport, talking about the importance of Miami getting it done tomorrow, high noon at Louisville. And obviously, as Miami fans, you want them to win every single game. But you talk about the stakes for this one. Showdown described this as possibly the closest Miami's going to have to a top 25 opponent the rest of the way. Although I think Syracuse can get into that conversation, even Duke, if Duke stays at one loss. But he's right that Louisville is, maybe the best overall team Miami has left on their schedule on paper. And if Miami loses this game, what do you think the pollsters are going to do? They're going to drop us way, way down. I think we all know that. And talk about making the ACC championship game would not be easy with a loss because, as he points out, there are right now 3 other teams with undefeated conference records, Clemson, SMU, and Pittsburgh. 2 of them don't play against each other or against Miami, Clemson and SMU. There are 6 other teams right now in the ACC with 1 conference loss. So if Miami were to suffer a conference loss, there's no guarantee you're going to climb back into that ACC championship mix. And a loss tomorrow, if Miami doesn't pull it off, would put you in a very tough spot for a college football playoff bid, because we know they're not going to favor non-ACC champions. They're going to look at other teams from the SEC or possibly the Big Ten. And you're going to be in a tough spot for the ACC championship game. So to talk about this and so many other things, bring on very good friend of the show, very good friend of mine. We're also going to talk, by the way, on this episode about some recruiting trends, including an Elijah Griffin announcement today, a new crystal ball in Miami's favor. We're going to talk about Mario Cristobal stock. We're going to talk about a couple of stats that do look good for Miami against Louisville. We're going to talk about Ward being mid so far this year. I guess that's a thing. Rudy Tamarchio is with us, former Sebastian the Ibis, of course. All right, so Rudy, I don't want to make Hurricanes fans panic out there, but I thought Showdown raised some compelling points. We all want to win tomorrow, of course, but if you lose that game tomorrow, your ACC championship aspirations and certainly your college football playoff aspirations take a gigantic hit.
Yeah, and that might have been part of the underlying theme of the players-only meeting that came through of saying, guys, we have to get our stuff together now because we have to, obviously Miami needs to keep winning to keep their hopes alive of making it to the ACC championship game and also their college football playoff aspirations. But at the same time, too, they have to look good while doing it. What we were talking about right before going on the air here, I just think it's like the most ACC thing, that the tie-breaking situation that you're going to go into in terms of how that works. Miami's only hope is that they stay undefeated. And even then they might need some help.
Yeah, so the tie-breaking scenario, like I was looking this up earlier this week, and I'm pretty sure I'm correct on what the tie-breaking scenario is. So there's a chance that, let's say, Miami, Clemson, and SMU all go undefeated in conference. It could also happen potentially with Pitt, although they don't play Miami, but Pitt plays both SMU and Clemson. I just feel like Clemson and SMU are both probably better than Pitt right now. But if Miami, Clemson, and SMU, who none of the 3 play one another, okay, if they all go unbeaten in ACC play, then obviously there's no head-to-head tiebreaker because they don't play each other. You can't go conference win percentage if they're all undefeated in conference. So you throw that out the window. The next tiebreaker would be the conference winning percentage of your opponents, which you can only play the teams that are on your schedule. So that takes it completely out of your control. And also they take the non-conference element out of it, Rudy. So Miami could potentially have a 12-0 regular season and miss out on an ACC championship game with 2 one-loss teams, because SMU and Clemson both have a loss. And by the way, Clemson has 2 more non-conference games left. They're not going to lose to the Citadel. South Carolina they'll probably won't lose to South Carolina, but it could happen. So you have a 2-loss Clemson and a 1-loss SMU make the ACC championship game with an undefeated Miami team missing out because of a tiebreaker. And then, God forbid, if you lose one conference game, it probably you're not going to see Charlotte in December.
There are some people in Tallahassee that probably tickled pretty at that idea, for sure, in terms of imagine like, oh, well, at least we played for the conference championship. We went undefeated and we didn't make it. You guys didn't even play for that. It's insane, to be perfectly honest with you, because even the fact that it's your conference opponent's winning percentage, if you go out and beat every single one of your teams, you're essentially shooting your own self in the foot because you're adding losses to them. So obviously Cal has 3 losses in conference. Virginia Tech has 3 losses already. I think 2 of them are in conference. And then, every other team that goes on, Louisville at this point in time will have 2. Should Miami win on Saturday, Louisville will have 2 losses in conference. They play Notre Dame, who plays a bunch of ACC teams on their schedule, but they don't technically count as an ACC opponent. So, it doesn't look good. So the style points aspect there, it's almost as if you have to hope at some point, hey, the playoff committee, should Miami go undefeated and be somehow left out of this equation for Charlotte, you kind of have to hope that the committee of people who don't like you, who've never liked you, said, well, at least they look good after those 2 close calls, and hope that you blow everybody out from here on out to even be considered as an at-large.
Yeah, I mean, I'd find you raised an interesting point. I mean, if Miami were to go like 12-0, even if they miss out on the ACC championship game for some crazy tiebreaker, I would even find it hard to believe that they would keep them out of the 12-team playoff with a 12-0. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, because I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, because I think Miami has a tough road game this weekend against Louisville, and it's a team that I feel the Cardinals, and I strongly feel this way, they're better than their 4-2 record would indicate, because this is, arguably outside of, Florida State, very talented team, but awful this year. But Louisville's another one where it's a very talented team that it's really been a lot of, Rudy, self-inflicted wounds and inefficiencies on third down where they've not been good, and in the red zone where they've not been good when it comes to scoring touchdowns, and some untimely penalties, something we're familiar with. So I think Louisville is a better team than their 4-2 record would indicate. At the same time, I think Miami's passing game matches very well against their passing defense. So I think Miami can absolutely win this game. It might be a shootout, though. I think I look at that over under 59.5 points. I'm probably likely to go over that number.
If you look at the trend, it definitely looks like it's going to be a shootout. And as a Miami fan who's already had 2, nail biters, I'd like to avoid a shootout as much as possible. Yeah. This Louisville team is such an enigma, because it's one of those where like they find a different way to lose, or they find a different way to have a close game these past, few game stretches. They were the better team, it felt like, against Notre Dame, and just shot themselves in the foot. And then they get outclassed by SMU, and which is a totally different style of offense that, it just runs very, very fast and is kind of undersized. You think that Louisville's defensive line would have some success there. And then in this squeaker of a win against Boston College, they also shot themselves in the foot multiple times. So it's one of those where it's so weird to see. Miami should match up really well. You mentioned the passing game. I would also argue even the running game, because against a physical team, they should, Miami playing physically should do that. And I think their offensive, they have the ability. We talked about this earlier in the season against Florida about how versatile Miami's offense looked, and you haven't really seen that lately because, hey, they've been playing from behind. So they've had to throw themselves out of jams. Miami can run fast when they want to, which seems like it gives Louisville's defense problems. But then they can also grind it out and pound the ball, which also gave Louisville's defense some problems. So optimistic there, but as every game it seems so far this year outside of Florida, Ball State, and Florida A&M, it's what defense are we getting and what half are we getting out of that defense?
Yeah, I would love to see the version of Miami that went into Gainesville be the version that goes into Louisville. You got the all white uniforms again. You're going with the stormtrooper look. It's a sold out Cardinal Stadium. The Swamp was sold out for that opening game, and Louisville actually. I'm assuming they're starting to get that fall weather up there. I haven't checked the forecast, but they're going all black at noon. So I would hope for their sake that it's like in the 50s or 60s and not in the 80s, because that's going to be hot for them out there. But that's probably not going to be a factor this time of year. But Rudy mentioned that players only meeting that Miami had during the bye week, and the theme has been not playing their best football to this point. And Cam Ward, despite how brilliant he's been, gave himself a pretty tough self-assessment. We'll talk about that when we come back. Folks, we're only getting started. You can't ruin a Friday. Keep it locked right here on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Folks, if you ever feel like you need a little boost in the bedroom, it's time you stop worrying about your performance and get Hims. You can feel confident whenever you're in the mood. I'm telling you, Hims is incredible. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable mints and Viagra and Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works best for you. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. HIMS.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. Make sure for your next listen, you check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs and I have had a really good week of shows. We take you around all the big games, all the big storylines in the conference. I got to give Virginia Tech a lot of credit. I know that earlier this week, we kind of looked at when Clemson visits Virginia Tech this year as kind of an automatic win for Clemson. I no longer feel that way. The Hokies looked really good in their dominant victory against Boston College. They looked pretty good against Miami, as we all saw. But continuing our coverage of the Miami Hurricanes at the Louisville Cardinals on Saturday at noon. Rudy, when I was watching the Cam Ward conference call midweek, I knew that when he was asked to assess his play so far this year, I wasn't expecting him to give like a cocky type of it. It's just not who Ward is. Like, I wasn't expecting him to be like, oh yeah, I think I should win the Heisman, or yeah, I'm playing great. So I really wasn't that surprised to hear him be a little self-critical. He referred to his play to this point as mid. He said, I missed a lot of plays. There's a lot of plays that I wish I could have back. We've got to stop leaving plays out there as a whole team. And listen, he's thrown a couple of costly interceptions this season, including a pick six against Cal that thankfully didn't end up costing Miami a victory. There's been times, Rudy, where he's been going for the jugular, and there have been checkdowns available that he hasn't taken. So I know, like, I'm sounding hypercritical here, but if Ward is going to be hypercritical on himself, I think that opens all of us up to realize he's not played his best football so far.
How can you not love this guy, though? I mean, having that self-observation to say, one, to be a tough critic of yourself, it's great when your best player is also his own toughest critic, because in terms of preparation, in terms of, how he's going out on the field and he's executing the next play, he's always locked in. But if you want to be tough with how you grade him, sure. A guy that's averaging over 300 yards a game and multiple touchdowns and, has a touchdown interception ratio that, the interceptions look ugly, but he's been incredibly efficient and accurate. I'm not going to knock him for being very hard on himself. And if it helps him drive to improve and to make some of those, changes in game. Yeah, we've all seen it. We've all seen the photos of Mark Fletcher or Damian Martinez wide open down the sideline, that if you just dump it off to him, he's going to get you the first down. He's probably going to get you 10, 12 yards, but you're looking downfield for the 30, 40-yard shot. I think some of that comes away also just based on how your defense is performing. And I think that's going to be the biggest part with Cam Ward, is to, one, trust the offense more, to know you can play from behind. You've done it twice in a row now, but you don't have to get it all back in one play. And that's where you can either dig yourself a bigger hole, or you can even give your defense a little bit of a rest, because if you're chunking out 12 yards on those different plays instead of getting the deep shot, you're still helping them rest and you're helping them adjust to get out there again. I don't think complementary football gets spoken about enough. And as much common sense as that sounds, it's a foreign concept to a lot of teams, and it gets lost in the shuffle when you're in the middle of a game.
So, and we look at, hoping Miami's defense helps the offense a little bit more this week, and vice versa, because like we were chatting during the Cal game, and there was not complimentary football being played on either side up until late in the second half in that one. But as far as the defense goes, how much of like the broken assignments, how much of that do you think could potentially have been fixed during the bye week if it was schematic stuff versus personnel stuff? Because one of the most common questions, Rudy, that I've gotten from listeners over the past week is, what sort of changes can they make? Like, do we need to make sure that Daryl Porter is playing more on the outside where he usually grades out better? Is there anyone else who should we be seeing more of Saquon Patterson on the field? I know Porter mentioned this week that he thinks a guy like Ryan Mack, another freshman, could be someone who gets more playing time in the future. I will say OJ Frederick, another freshman, has been playing really well this year. So what do you think needs to happen for the defensive backfield to break out of their funk?
We're both glass half full kind of people here. So I'm going to stick with that and just say that I think the bye week came at a perfect time, because if you go back to like the Randy Shannon days when they started, they got annihilated by that triple option by Georgia Tech the first year under Paul Johnson. And then since then, they never got bitten by that again. And it usually did really, really well. And scheduling wise, they were playing Georgia Tech after their bye week. So all they did was go back to basics and say, look, this is man-to-man defense. This is hat-on-hat football. And a lot of what Miami's big mistakes have been over the course of the past few games. And even, look, you can go back as far as the Florida game where they had that one long touchdown run in the first half, which was a simple man-on-man assignment. So I think this is the best time to do it, because it looks like it's more just schematic in the sense of you're just going back to basics. It's X's and O's, and it's just making sure you're aligned properly and communicating. And I think also having players rested up and ready to go again helps, because having key players all on the field at the same time increases the communication, increases the lineup and how you're, positioned on the field. So I think it couldn't come a better time. And if you look at what Louisville does offensively, Miami should be pretty well, prepared for it. In terms of their passing offense, they like to take deep shots, yes, but if you're just running a guy on a streak down the sideline, like Miami should be able to cover that. They're getting beaten other ways right now.
I think that's a great assessment. And thinking about Miami's defense, when I was talking earlier this week on Tuesday with the Truth Teller, we were discussing, beyond Cam Ward, outside of Cam Ward, who's been the most instrumental to Miami's success, and a player that I didn't bring up right away, but he did, and I'm glad he did, is Wesley Besant at linebacker, who is having, he's been good the previous 2 years, but he's taken his game to another level this year. And Adam Lichtenstein of the South Florida Sun Sentinel pointed out this week that Wesley Besant is right now has the highest defensive grade, Pro Football Focus grade, of any linebacker in the ACC right now. And it takes me back, Rudy, when I was at ACC Media Days in Charlotte back in late July, and Besant wasn't there, but Kiko Maui-Noa was there as one of Miami's 4 player representatives. And when I had to sit down with Kiko, and this is, available somewhere on my YouTube channel if you go back a couple of months, and I remember asking Kiko, like, who's going to be a breakout guy on the defense this year? And without hesitation, the name that he brought up was Wesley Besant, talking about the great offseason that he was having, where, he's not only, done the usual strength and conditioning stuff where he's put on, better quality size and he's increased his quickness and explosiveness, but he's also really, I think, just kind of hit another level when it comes to his understanding of the game at the position he plays. So he's been someone who has, and this, Rudy, comes at the perfect time, because you talk about guys who haven't been at their best this year. Kiko has not been at his best this season. So thankfully, Besant is stepping up and picking up some of that slack.
And also, if you look at just how he's kind of changed over the course of the years here as a Miami Hurricane, he's brought on more size, but he hasn't lost any of his speed, which is really helpful in terms of being a linebacker, being able to run sideline to sideline. And look, the only knock you have on Wes was that long run against Florida beginning of the year. He's the guy that, Jaden Davis got a lot of the blame by the fans, but if you look at it schematically, and even Lance Guidry mentioned afterwards, actually, that was the linebacker that messed that one up. And who's the linebacker that's right there supposed to be setting the edge was Wes. So outside of that one thing, I don't think there's anything else that you can knock him for. Hey, he made a big hit at the end of the game against Cal to, keep that third down going. And people want to say what they want to say about the rules, but form tackle, and if he's the highest graded guy, it looks like the experts kind of agree with that assessment.
Yeah.
So, it's great to have him. He's been kind of quiet in the sense of how he performs. He's there on a lot of the plays. He's chasing, he's making tackles for loss, but it's not so much the linebacking core that I'm really concerned with. It's more of just the general cohesiveness of the defense together, because your timing of your defensive backs and the time that your pressure comes from your defensive line and those passing downs, you can get to the quarterback in 2 seconds, but if there's a guy wide open on the coming down the field, it doesn't matter. So it's a matter of everybody kind of knowing what their assignments are and what preparation they're going to have for Louisville. Are they going to expect quick throws? Do the defensive linemen have to get their hands up? Are the linebackers who possibly may be blitzing have to get their hands up at the line of scrimmage because they can't get to the quarterback, or are they having to drop back into coverage? So that's more what I'm concerned with. And Wes is one piece of a larger, unit that he's performing really well. That's awesome. I want to see him keep doing that. And I want to see, some other players step up.
Let's go from players to coaches, because I've noticed this week Mario Cristobal, and I think it's deserved. I mean, obviously still half the season to go. So, my opinion could change on this, but I think through 6 games in, I think it's deserved to see him popping up on some Coach of the Year watch lists. There may even be additional ones that I haven't noticed, but I've noticed he's turned up on the Bear Bryant Award watch list and the Bobby Dodd Award watch list for Outstanding Coach of the Year. Because to me, it's worth noting, Rudy, and I know a lot of people will see Mario turn up in these lists and be like, the guy who can't take a knee, what is he doing on there? But no, to his credit, Miami has not had any issues with poor clock management, timeout management, in-game management. This is something he told us before the season he was addressing, and so far so good, because you don't pull off the types of fourth quarter comebacks that they pulled off if you're not managing the clock well. And that seems to be something he's fixed. And of course, Miami is 6-0 to start the year. So I think it's deserved that you're seeing him on these watch lists.
It's a good thing to lead by example, and something that the entire staff always talks about is that a lot of this happens in between the ears, making sure that you're sound. Yeah. And if you're watching the coaches, they're doing the exact same thing. It's really funny to have that criticism of saying, oh, well, this is the guy that didn't take the knee last year. They took a knee against Cal, won that game, and they look really good in time management. I mean, the fact that we went through multiple games and we're pointing out coaching mistakes by other staffs is one, a compliment to them, and two, it's a compliment to Miami's record, because if you're going to be undefeated, you're going to end up on all these watch lists. One, your players get more attention. They could have the same talent level as the team that was, 2 losses or 3 losses. But if your team is undefeated, you automatically get more attention. That goes with coaches. If you look at when Miami was winning awards for having the best coordinators out there in the country, like when Randy Shannon won Best Defensive Coordinator in 2001, it's a national championship year. It makes sense. Larry Coker won the Coaches Award that year for being the first head coach in a long time to have their first season as a head coach end up, resulting in a national championship. So say what you want about how that team was put together and all of it, but that's what happened on the field. Obviously, Mario Cristobal is going to get all of the credit as the team continues to win. And hey, let's keep an eye out for Shannon Dawson making it on a watch list too for an offensive coordinator, because that's the number 1 offense in the country right now.
Yeah, and of course, like if Miami does have coaches winning awards, they will, I'm sure, rightfully give a lot of that credit to players because something that's been different this year, and like I'm sure you could give Mario Cristobal a certain amount of credit for this, but it's really more of a player-led team than it's been, and that was something that Cristobal wanted. Like this is what he wanted to have a player-led team, but then at the same time, if it's more of a player-led team, does that mean you take some credit away from coaches? But I think this is the culture that Cristobal wanted to establish, and it's the reason why he's recruited the types of personalities he has, because this is what he wanted. Like he wanted to have the type of team that's going to organize a players only meeting during the bye week when you're 6-0. Like that's exactly what Cristobal wanted, and he recruited for that.
Well, look at the entire culture of Miami Hurricane football. When they're good, it's because they have strong, compelling personalities who
Yeah.
want to win at all costs. And even if they're winning, just getting by, that's not enough for them. Name any of the teams, the 80s, the early 90s, the early 2000s, all of them had strong personalities that were very player led. Hey, they even said in the documentaries, we wanted Larry Coker to take over because they knew he wasn't going to mess with what we were doing. There was a player-led team on that, regard too. And when Miami has its struggles, it's not quite as player-led at that point. I think in terms of complementary football, it's one thing to watch that between offense and defense. It's the same thing with personalities and how you adjust to practice and how you adjust to your culture. You don't have to be a disciplinarian as a coach in college. If you have the guys that are able to take the criticism and apply it and enforce it among each other, it makes your life a lot easier because all you have to do is worry about game planning and preparation on your side. If you have to deal with, a bunch of players off getting DUIs and running for, 90 miles an hour in a 15, that's a different story.
I like you bring up the Larry Coker example because, like, he was basically hired by the players. Like, the players essentially staged a sit-in in
Yeah,
Tommy
in Paulie's
Shalayla's office. You got to hire Larry Coker, and then and Coker obviously was able to push the right buttons with that player-led team. And then I think the reason why Coker lost the plot a few years down the road was he wasn't recruiting those types of players. Coker started recruiting stars instead of culture, which I think was something that ended up costing him down the road. And speaking of recruiting, there's a couple of things to monitor now, including a big announcement coming today, a new crystal ball in Miami's favor. You guys want to keep it locked right here. We got Rudy Tamarchio with us. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. We're certainly not done with FanDuel. Guys, yeah, Miami, 4.5-point favorites against Louisville on FanDuel. Over under 59.5. I that's what I feel pretty good about hitting the over. If you look at the trends in Miami games the last couple of weeks, I think that's what I like at FanDuel. And NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more right on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you so much for making this Friday Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Something that I've been monitoring, Rudy. Of course, we all know the situation Billy Napier's in Florida. It's like every single week you get these, Gator Twitter insiders who are like, "Oh, the boosters, they're getting together. They're going to raise that buyout. It's coming this week. It hasn't happened yet." Billy Napier is still gainfully employed, but he's basically a dead man walking at this point. And, Miami already about a week ago flipped Joshua Moore, 4-star receiver from that 2025 Gators class. And another one of a few to monitor is Ben Hanks Jr., who's a Florida legacy, but a South Florida kid, 4-star cornerback. And I was reading actually on the Gator boards to see what their experts are saying about recruiting. And they pointed out the last time that Ben Hanks visited UF was for the Miami game when Miami beat the Gators in the Swamp. And he actually attended Miami's win over Virginia Tech, visited for that game. He told the Gator Insider at 24/7 he does not plan to visit Florida this weekend for the Kentucky game. So there is some concern there, Rudy, from a Gators point of view. And as a Miami guy, I would love to have Ben Hanks. This is an incredible incredible corner, and we know Miami needs DBs. So I hope this one works out in our favor in the end.
Look, the fact that he was one of the recruits that was at that Miami game at the beginning of the year, we all know about what happened with that recruiting section and how some of the best plays of that game was right in front of them and how friendly they were to the Miami players going off the field and how, unprofessional the recruiting staff was.
Yeah, the Gator Karen, she was putting hands on people. Stay out of our section.
She wanted to speak to the manager in the worst way. And you've got all of these, guys in their jean shorts sitting in their parents' basements in Central Florida, starting their GoFundMe with their Bitcoin. So, I mean, look, it's one of those things where let's give Billy Napier a little bit of credit here for how they played against Tennessee and how that team looks a little different than how it did against Miami. They should have won that game. They should have absolutely won that game. And from some bad clock management and for, having some unsightly breakdowns at the end, they played for 3.5 quarters as the better team. And look, that last drive to tie the game to force overtime was unbelievable as well. So it was one of those things. I was kind of surprised, but at the same time, I'm thinking, is this enough to kind of like salvage a year if they were to get this game and then, win a couple more, because their schedule is already so tough to begin with. But yeah, if you're Florida or Florida State, your recruiting is not safe until they put pen to paper.
Right. Yeah. No, we'll see. Florida State takes on Duke tonight, Friday night. They're 3-point underdogs. I don't know. I feel like Florida State might win this game, Rudy. I'm not really buying the Duke thing. Like, they're 5-1, but they've had a super cupcake schedule. Didn't look very good in their loss against Georgia Tech. They've never beaten Florida. Maybe this is the year, but they've literally never beaten Florida State before in football. But a couple other recruiting notes. Elijah Griffin, 5-star defensive lineman, is announcing. I'm not sure if it's tonight or later today, but I'm also not necessarily going to tune into that one live because most of the trends are saying Georgia. I hope I'm wrong. I know Miami has made a push and Jason Taylor is working very hard for this one, but I'm expecting Elijah Griffin to pick Georgia. Maybe this will be like, this is a terrible example, but maybe it'll be like Cormani McClain a couple of years ago, who did initially announce Miami. And I was like, oh, that was a surprise. Maybe this will be a surprise, but I hope if this does go Miami's way in a surprise, I hope it sticks, unlike that one. But that was like the only other time that I was like super, like I had made other plans that day. And when I heard Cormani announce I was super shocked by that one. And then another one, Miami has received a crystal ball prediction from Gabby Urrutia from 24/7 Sports, who does an excellent job covering Hurricanes recruiting. He's put in a crystal ball for 4-star linebacker Kellen Wiley, who's a teammate of Gerard Pringle at Armwood High School in the Tampa area. And Wiley recently, Rudy, he dropped a top 10, which doesn't narrow it down all that much. Miami, Florida, Maryland, Penn State, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Louisville, and Illinois. But a lot of the trends for him for the last couple of months, he's having an awesome senior season in high school. A lot of the trends are going Miami's way there.
And you could see why. I mean, in terms of you need some more depth on that defense. It's great to have somebody come in. They're undefeated team. They're doing really well. They're trending up. And you've got some great coaching behind you here in South Florida. So if you look at the list of the other 9 schools that are there, nothing really stands out as, oh, that's maybe a better option. Penn State's obviously in the top 10. They're doing well. But look, Penn State escaping against USC, that's something that I thought Penn State was losing that game in terms of how they were playing defensively. They've seen a little bit of a drop since Manny Diaz left, and calling the plays there and how good that defense looked a year ago. But I feel good about it too. And I know you touched on it a couple episodes ago, but hey, that picture of DJ Pickett with the whole family like that, how can you not get excited about it? I don't care how much LSU attention he's getting, or if Shaquille O'Neal is going to have him some, get him some podcast attention and a couple chains, but it looks good for us.
Yeah, no, it does. And I don't know if we're going to get that one over the finish line, because I know LSU, and he's got a great relationship with Corey Raymond, and I don't discount that, but I know LSU is going to do whatever they can to lock that one down. But hopefully Miami can maybe give DJ something to think about before signing day. I know Rudy has given us all some things to think about today. By the way, before I let you run, what's your prediction for the Louisville game? I've gone on record 38-27 Miami. What do you think it's going to be?
I've been saying the past couple of weeks, it's like, look, they're going to figure it out and they're going to, look back like the first couple of games of the year. I don't want to say that anymore because I feel like maybe I'm cursing them a little bit. So I'm going to say Miami wins, yes, but I'm expecting another roller coaster ride because they got to put it together for four quarters to convince me. So do I have to give you a score?
Give me a score. Yeah, do it.
Okay. I'll say 41-28 Miami.
Okay.
Right. I'm going to be optimistic, but I'm going to say that maybe Louisville front loads that 28 and Miami figures it out.
So if they win by more than one score, maybe we won't have everyone freaking out about like one referee decision from the game then, as it's been the last couple of weeks.
Well, hopefully that was discussed in the meeting too, because you know the ACC. For some of these guys, yes, this is their first foray in what we used to call now the divisions are gone, the circle of suck. The entire conference is a circle of suck now, with the exception of the top 4 teams. Everyone else has cannibalized each other. The best way for you to win is to take it out of the officials' hands. And in the ACC, it doesn't matter if you're doing everything right. They may just throw a flag because they feel like it that day.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like I'm always concerned because I know someone could say, well, look at how you're benefiting from referees. Like, trust me, it's not bias, it's incompetence. So that, if you feel like you've been on the right end or the winning end of certain calls, that can change because, as we all know, ACC stands for another crappy call. And that'll do it for us. He's Rudy Tamarchio. Make sure you follow him at Rudy Tamarchio on X and follow us at Locked On Canes. And I think we're going to be doing another episode today with the Postcast King. So you want to stay tuned for that. Jim Greashopper's going to join me a little bit later on, probably for because we're not going to have a pregame episode tomorrow because it's a noon game. I figure we'll do like a Friday pregame with Grease. So we'll talk to you guys again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.